What's up, I'm Rocket.
And I'm Epok, and this is every rare in PokeMMO.
This video is organized into two sections, rare Pokemon and rare items. We'll be explaining what rares exist, why they're rare, and how they came into the game. The goal of this video is to act as an encyclopedia for all rares in PokeMMO. Without further ado, let's start with the rare Pokemon.
The first kind of rare Pokemon we'll be discussing are NPC Trade Pokemon. The following Pokemon on screen are all available as NPC Trades in the Kanto region. Back in the early days of PokeMMO, players would trade certain Pokemon with NPCs and then receive a Pokemon in return with the NPC's OT. These Pokemon have a static set of IVs, and you can tell they're NPC Trades because their OT is the same as the NPC's name and it's in all caps. The last day that you were able to do NPC Trades and get the static IVs with the trainer OT was January 7th, 2015, also known as the Hoenn region playtest. So you'd think that the 2012 variations are the rarest as they're older and tend to be worth the most amount of money. But the 2015 variations are actually rarer than the 2012s because there was only 7 days that they could be obtained. Nowadays, if you did NPC trades, they'd have a neutral nature, and they'd have 15 base IVs on every stat, just as if you got a starter from the storyline. Old versions of these NPC trades are worth quite a lot of money. The rarest of these NPC trades are the female Nidoran, Nidorina, Seal, Tangela, Lickitung, and Electrode, as players rarely did these trades. The more common NPC trades are Farfetch, Jinx, and Mr. Mime. The Jinx in specific is pretty common because back then there weren't that many good ice types for the story, and people would just pick that one up.
Next, we're going to discuss 252 plus EV Pokemon. In current day PokeMMO, EVs cap out at 252, and you can recognize this cap as the 252 is in green text. However, back in 2012, the first year of PokeMMO, EVs capped out at 255, so for that year, if a Pokemon was EV trained to max EVs, it could go all the way up to 255. EVs increase stats with every 4 EVs added, so having 255 EVs offers no benefit over having 252 EVs, it's just an aesthetic. Not a lot of people EV train their Pokemon to max EVs in those early days, so finding Pokemon with EVs above 252 is very rare and makes the Pokemon worth a lot of yen. You only see this on 2012 Pokemon, and collectors kill for adding these Pokemon to their collection due to their rarity and the history behind this type of rare.
Now, we're going to talk about Squirtle OT Shinies. Squirtle was the name of the staff member who rewarded the Shinies as in-game rewards for staff-held events. Every time a player won an event and a Shiny had to be spawned in as a reward, Squirtle would create them, and thus the Shiny would have his OT. Nowadays, if an event reward Shiny is spawned in, it'll have the OT event reward, so getting the Squirtle OT for an event reward Shiny is no longer possible. There are not many of these left in existence, and this is one of the rares that only the top echelon of collectors possess due to its high price tag.
The next rare is No OT Pokemon. In 2022, a mysterious ball was released that gave Ice Pokemon, and for a short period of time, any Pokemon from these mysterious balls would have no OT. These Pokemon all had a hidden ability, random IVs, and nature. There were different types of mysterious balls, and the Premier Ball variation of these mysterious balls would give no OTs with Fateful Encounter. The Fateful Encounter no OTs go for drastically more yen than a normal no OT. Additionally, the price of no OT Pokemon can drastically increase if the Pokemon has competitive IVs in nature. There are a pretty decent amount of these in the game, but they still sell for a pretty penny, as collectors like to collect a big stock of them.
Next up is the brand new kind of rare Pokemon added to the game with the most recent Encounter Tracker update. Before this update, the description of shiny catches would simply just state the date and location of each catch. However, after the Encounter Tracker update, the description of shiny catches now show how many encounters the player had right before the shiny catch. This spawned a new type of collectible. Players have started collecting all sorts of shiny Pokemon with the lowest and highest encounter counts on them. So for example, a shiny catch with 1 encounter would be the lowest possible one. But honestly, anything under 25 is pretty impressive. Anything under 5 in specific is really impressive because, 5x swords. And the opposite side of the coin is also true. Anything over the shiny rate, like 300,000 encounters or higher, that would be an insanely rare collectible.
Moving on, we have Unknown OT Pokemon. Now, you may be familiar with shiny Pokemon that have Unknown OT. This occurs when a player breeds a shiny they did not catch. That is the only way nowadays an Unknown OT will be created. However, it was possible back in 2016 to get Unknown OT on non-shiny Pokemon. In 2016, when a player bred a Pokemon they did not have caught OT on, the Pokemon would come out with Unknown OT. Nowadays, if this is done, the player will receive a Pokemon with their OT followed by an asterisk. Because it was uncommon for players to breed Pokemon they never had caught before, these Unknown OT Pokemon are very rare. The price of Unknown OT drastically increases if the Pokemon has competitive IVs in nature. I did want to point out there is another phenomenon where you can get Unknown OT Pokemon from a different year aside from 2016. I have a screenshot here of a 2019 Unknown OT Pokemon. The way this was created was the player created the egg back in 2016, but they didn't actually hatch the egg until 2019. So the Unknown OT was kept, but the year changed. I'm pretty sure this is the only instance of this happening.
The next sort of rare Pokemon we'll be discussing are Raid Alphas from Lunar New Year that don't have the particle that they're meant to come with. When a raid in PokeMMO is completed, specifically on Lunar New Year, the players that partook in the raid will receive the raid boss as an alpha with the particle Spirit of Spring. However, there were short periods of times way back in 2023 and also in 2025 where a glitch occurred and the Pokemon would not come with Spirit of Spring. Collectors will buy these as rare glitched alphas and then try to breed them together over and over and over again until they get a Shalfa variation of the Pokemon without the particle, because it's the rarest version of it. The following Pokemon on screen are all of the alphas that have glitch variations without the particles. Lopunny is the only version from 2025 with this glitch. The rest are from 2023.
The next rare we'll be discussing is the earliest catches of Pokemon caught from specific region releases. The most popular example of this is Pokemon from the Hoenn release of January 7th, 2015. Collectors will try to collect the decks of all Hoenn Pokemon that were unique to that region upon release. Because a lot of Pokemon were bred, released, or just lost to time, there are not a lot of them remaining, so collectors take it upon themselves to collect dex entries from the release year of the region. Other collectors try to collect the earliest catches of the Pokemon from the region release, so catches that are as close to the release date of January 7th, 2015 in the case of the Hoenn release.
Moving on, we've got wild-caught Pokemon with great IVs and nature. This is a kind of niche thing, but a lot of collectors value Pokemon that fall into this category. I think it'd be easier to explain with this rare, for example. This is my Medicham. This Medicham has an ideal nature for Trick Room and in PvP in general, and it has the best IVs possible for it. Getting a wild shiny with perfect IVs where it's needed is already rare as it is, but when it comes with a nature like this, it's insane. Any type of shiny that rolls the ideal IV and nature for its type of PvP or utility purpose tends to be worth a ton of yen because of just how unlikely it is to find something like this. You gotta remember that in PokeMMO, the shiny odds are 1 in 30,000, so getting anything with these types of stats is crazy.
The next rare we'll be discussing is wild-caught Pokemon with 0 IVs or the same IVs on each stat. The chances of getting 6 times 0 or 6 times 31 wild-caught is 1 out of 1,073,741,824. That's pretty insane odds. Linked in the description is a forum post that explains the odds of getting different variations of IVs. But anyways, collectors will seek out wild-caught Pokemon with insane IV combinations like all 0s, all 31s, all 5s, all 15s, etc. On screen are a few examples so you can see what I'm talking about. Prices on these definitely vary, but because of how unlikely it is to pull a wild-caught with insane IV combos like these, collectors go crazy for them.
Next up are Pokemon with cool OTs. There are a lot of different types of OTs that Pokemon can have that make them rare and collectible, but most of them fall under these categories: words, Pokemon names, staff OTs, and 2-letter OTs. Word OTs are something like Blue, Diamond, Team, just nice OG words like that. Pokemon name OTs are stuff like Venusaur with OT Venusaur, or maybe an Ekans with the OT Ekans, or a Chansey with the OT Chansey, just like matching name with the matching Pokemon. Staff OTs are just Pokemon that have the OT of old staff members, like Q or Rach or Desu, that sort of stuff. A lot of those were given out as rewards, so they're pretty rare. 2-letter OTs are just names with 2 letters in them, which are the least amount of characters that you can have in an OT. I should also mention that with the name change update, you can no longer change to a name that's that low. So these are a lot rarer now. There are some other niche examples of rare usernames, like this QOT that has a typo that I own. Q's OT has a capital K in it, but this Dredagon had a typo when it was spawned in with a lowercase k, making it different from all the other ones. Collectors usually have a nice collection of these that they can gather as a fun side thing, because a lot of the time you can get them for really cheap, or people will just give them away.
The next set of rares we'll be taking a look at are underleveled Pokemon. There have been dozens of instances where catch locations and catching levels for Pokemon have changed over the years. The best example of this is Gyarados. Magikarp evolves into Gyarados at level 20, but back in the day you used to be able to catch Gyarados in the wild before the evolution level of 20. This is no longer possible as they changed the Gyarados wild-caught levels, so Gyarados that are sub-level 20 typically sell for a lot of yen as they're considered rare now. Another example of this phenomenon are the Hoenn starters. They used to be able to be caught at level 15 and level 25, but that was changed over the years, so wild catches sharing the old level will sell for a pretty penny. There are dozens of other examples of this that I don't have the time nor means to list out in this video, but if you do some digging, you can find other similar rares.
Moving on, we have 2022 wild-caught shinies without 31s. You know how when there's an alpha spawn, the start of the evolution line will appear around it as interactable encounters. They're like the baby spawns, that's what people call them. Well, there was a week in 2022 where if these Pokemon were shiny, they have a chance to not have a 31 when they were caught. Here are some screenshots of this phenomenon. As of recent years, normally every shiny that is caught guarantees 1x31 IV, but this wasn't the case for this particular week in 2022. When interacting with the start of of the Evo lines that came from the Alpha spawns. These are an extremely niche rare, and they rarely ever come up, but they're really, really cool.
Moving on, we got a rare I've mentioned several times on this channel, North Pole Pokemon. North Pole Pokemon are simply Pokemon with the North Pole catch location. If you're not familiar, the North Pole was an event location held as a Christmas event from the years 2015 to 2018. The event no longer occurs, so it isn't possible to get a Pokemon with the North Pole catch location anymore. There's a finite supply of these Pokemon in circulation, which is why they're so rare. On screen now are all the Pokemon that can be natural caught North Pole Pokemon. I say natural caught because there's another rare that has spawned from this North Pole rare phenomenon, and that is North Pole hatched Pokemon. These are simply Pokemon hatched in the North Pole. These usually, if not always, are some type of comp breed. I personally own the 3 you see on screen, and these go for considerably more than a natural caught North Pole Pokemon. This is because the player not only had to partake in the North Pole event, but decided to hatch Pokemon at the event to get the hatch location. The event was kind of gatekeep for most players to begin with because you needed high level Pokemon to complete the dungeon in the first place, so any rare from the dungeon is very desired by collectors.
This next one is pretty silly, but I like it a lot. We'll be discussing a super niche collectible that not a lot of people even know exists. I have no story or history behind why this is rare. I just know it exists. I used to have a couple on my old account. There are these alpha Patrats that have 1x31 IVs instead of 2x31 IVs like other alphas. It only occurred for like one alpha spawn, so these are pretty weird, pretty niche Pokemon. But hey, now you know about it.
The next rare we'll be discussing is the most popular type of rare in PokeMMO. I'm sure you were waiting for this one to come up, but old Pokemon are the next rare we'll be discussing. This section has a lot of niche details, so sit back, lock in, as this one's a doozy. Old Pokemon are any Pokemon from 2012 to 2015, as they're over a decade old and they're very desired by collectors. Many collectors will try to collect the living decks from old years when the game was first released. Obviously, the older the Pokemon, the rarer and the more expensive it is, so 2012 is the most expensive and rarest Pokemon you can collect. PokeMMO's first stable public version was launched in August of 2012, but any Pokemon caught prior to December 11, 2012 would have the catch date December 11, 2012. Any 2012 Pokemon with this catch date is considered a first day 2012, and typically collectors value this detail in their 2012 collections. Having this catch date can buff the value of 2012 rares, especially if it's shiny. Additionally, there are certain Pokemon from old years, especially 2012 and 2013, that are so rare because there's just not a lot of them in circulation. These Pokemon are Absol, Lunatone, Unknown, and Porygon. These Pokemon typically sell for a lot more than most 2012s and 2013s. Additionally, any old shiny is very rare and sells for a lot of yen, way more than the shiny would normally sell for. Additionally, any Kanto starter from 2012 especially, but any of the first years of the game's release sell for a lot of yen, especially if those starters have a boss particle on them. Another tidbit about old Pokemon rares is any Hoenn starter from 2015 is worth a lot of yen. Hoenn was released in January of 2015, so any Hoenn starter from that year is worth a lot, due to the fact that a lot of them were lost to time, and a lot of collectors want them for their 2015 Living Dex collections.
The next one I'll be talking about is the Met at Kanto glitch rare Pokemon. Essentially, there are some Pokemon in the game from recent years that don't list a catch location. They just say Met in Kanto. Here's a screenshot of an Articuno that exists with this glitch. I'm not really sure if it's only the Pokemon from a certain time in 2023 that have this phenomenon, because this has been a glitch at other times, but these are exceptionally rare. There is not a lot of these in circulation, and we believe it's only Pokemon that came really, really close to the release of the update. So this Articuno is likely one of the first ones ever caught.
The next rare we'll be discussing is the first set of alphas that were released back in 2022. The first alphas were the following Pokemon on screen now. These were quite literally the first alpha spawns in the game, and because it was such a new feature, a lot of these actually ended up being Master Balled, funny enough. These are already base priced for a decent amount, but there are other factors that can add significant value to these Pokemon. The first being particles. Some of the first alphas were giving Kanto Friends Particle, which adds a significant value to their base price. Additionally, if the player's party was a very low level when they encountered the alpha, which was very uncommon, the alpha would be level 5. So any first alpha rare that is level 5 base prices for way more than normal first alpha rares, and even more if it has Kanto Friends. There are some that also have Menacing Spirit on them, which also sell for quite a bit, but not as much as Kanto Friends. Immediately after the first alpha sets were released, the devs dropped the Kanto Starter Alphas from the same year. Any Kanto Starter Alpha base prices for a ton of money, as that was the only time they were ever made available to players. Additionally, egg hunting Shalpa Kanto starters is a very desired hunt. These Kanto Alpha starters are technically a rare of their own, but I included it in this section because of how similar they are.
The next rare we'll be talking about are the first boss particle legendaries. These are the legendary Pokemon that have the first boss particle that they're possibly ever able to get on them. So for the birds, it's Dark Crystal. For the dogs and Shaman, it's Phantom. And for Jirachi and Heatran, it's whatever the next boss particle is this year. So whenever Halloween comes out, that's the first one you can get for Heatran and Jirachi, because those two both came out after Halloween last year.
The next rare we'll be discussing is any Pokemon with the Pumpkid Particle, also known as Pumpkid's Treat Particle. This was the first boss particle from the Pumpkin boss released in the 2018 Halloween event. This is the most expensive and rarest particle in the game and has a very high base price. Any old Pokemon or any rare we previously mentioned in this video that has this particle shoots up in value significantly, as it's extremely desired due to the rarity and significance. There's not much else to say other than the fact that this particle is very rare rare, very desired, and very cool.
The next kind of rare we'll be discussing are Johto starters, but caught in the Safari. The Johto starters used to be catchable in the Safari zone of Hoenn, but they were removed so it's no longer possible to catch them in the Safari. They were removed with Johto, I believe, because they just added lure spots for them. So any Johto starter that was caught in the Safari zone has a decent base price for it, and they're quite desired by collectors who want a good piece of PokeMMO history, especially if they have really good IVs. Back in the day when people would catch these, they're really hard to catch in the Safari, so it was quite a pain to get these for your decks.
The next rare we'll be discussing are ComParticle Pokemon. ComParticle is a term that I coined, so let me explain. Old ComParticle Pokemon are essentially comp Pokemon that have rare boss particles on them. There are surprisingly not a lot of Pokemon from the years 2012 to 2016 that are comp ready and have rare boss particles on them. This is more of a niche rare, but myself and a few other collectors I know collect these, and they're pretty rare.
The last rare we'll be discussing are Shiny Legendaries, a PokeMMO player's wet dream. This is pretty self-explanatory, but any legendary that is shiny is worth an astronomical amount of money, and it's rare as fuck. The legendary encounter rate is so low, and you can only encounter one bird and one dog a month, so the chances of hitting the shiny roll on an encounter like that is so low, making these unbelievably rare. There are a few confirmed shiny legendaries, and even a confirmed Shalfa Suicune, which could only be pulled from a raid. The only legendaries that haven't been confirmed to have a shiny pool as of this video are Shaman and Jirachi, and obviously any shiny legendary that's secret shiny is worth way more than a regular shiny, but this is like comparing a few billion to a lot of billions. They're both still worth a shit ton each.
Okay, we finished every single Pokemon rare in PokeMMO, but this video is every rare in PokeMMO, so we can't end this video without discussing item rares. To start things off, we got the Prism Scale, an item originally found in Unova, but can no longer be collected today. In the base game, this item was used to evolve Feebas into Melodic, but in PokeMMO, Feebas just evolves via levels, so the item is useless. Collectors like to collect this item and put it on the held item slot of their rare Pokemon as a flex.
Next up, we have the Fab Mail. Fab Mail was a held item that came from the Jinx NPC trade in Kanto way back in the day. You can no longer get Fab Mail from the Jinx NPC trade, so there are very few left of these in the game. Not to mention, people just didn't think this thing was valuable. You know, you get like a random mail on a Pokemon from an in-game trade, you're not gonna think it's that crazy. But nowadays, people love to collect this item and put them as their held item slot on their rare Pokemon as a flex, as it's just another way to upgrade your Pokemon for when you link it to people.
Next, we got the Party Hat. The Party Hat was released as a limited vanity in 2013 and was later removed from the gift shop. There's only one confirmed Party Hat in the game, and it's owned by the player Teresa. At the time of its release, it wasn't considered very cool or very flashy, so not a lot of players even considered buying it, especially because it wasn't an event item, it was just in the gift shop. It's impossible for me to put a value on this, as it's so unbelievably rare, and there's only one confirmed Party Hat in the game.
Next, we're going to talk about all the other rare and expensive vanity items. We've got the Night Helmet, the orange and blue flaming skulls, the Electric Storm hairstyle, the Q Hat, the Desu Lab Coat colored and uncolored, and the Ghost costume, as well as the Scythe. All of these vanities are rare as fuck and expensive as fuck. These all came from past events and past gift shop items. As of the recording of this video, Scythe markets are around 350 mil. The Ghost costume markets are over 850 mil, and all the other rares never hit the market as they're worth so much that they're over the cash cap, meaning that like you can't even list them on the GTL, you have to do trades for them. It is important to note, however, that the colored Desu Lab Coat is worth a lot more than the regular one, because back in the day you had to reach out to Desu himself and request that they color your lab coat. Not a lot of players did that, so there's way less of those in circulation.
Okay, that is every rare in PokeMMO in one video. This project took an unbelievable amount of time to research and took a ton of work behind the scenes to create, so if you could leave a like and a comment, I'd really appreciate it. Also, please, if you haven't already, check out and sub to Epok. He was a massive help in creating this video and makes amazing PokeMMO content. You'd especially like his content if you're into collecting PokeMMO rares or anything we discussed in this video. Anyways, thanks for watching. This has been Rocket. Smell you later.